let's move on. What would be your advice to South Africa? South Africa is facing so many challenges, violence against people that are not citizens of South Africa. This is happening time and again.
Yes.
What would be your advice to African countries and indeed the government of South Africa?
First of all, one must understand the history of South Africa. South Africa, since it became a democratic country, is only 25 years. And that is after they had been subjected to a regime that dehumanized the people through apartheid. And for that reason, you will find that in South Africa, we still have a large population. Nearly 80% of the population do not participate in the economy. And the net effect is that they are traumatized and they are impatient with what their government is doing. But they must be reminded, particularly the government must be reminded, that you have a duty to tell your people that your enemies are not people from Malawi, not people from Zambia, not people from Namibia, not people from Nigeria. Your enemies are the men and women whom you have entrusted with the resources to create opportunities for yourself. Because when you begin to expel Nigerians and Ghanaians, once you have expelled all of them and your circumstances do not change, then you will turn on each other and you will destroy the country. So my own view is that I would want to see President Cyril Ramaphosa telling the people in a passionate manner that your problem is not with fellow Africans. These fellow Africans actually helped you during the struggle. They denied themselves. They were part of the frontline states. And for that reason, it is critical that you accommodate them. And I am happy that I've listened to my friend Malema speaking out loudly. I would want to see President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking a lot more loudly. I've heard President, or rather, a former Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, I think, what is his name? Mangasutu Buthelezi also coming out and speaking loudly. I would want to hear more voices.
How do we deal with the problem of people trekking to South Africa for greener pastures? I will finish on that note tonight.
Let me tell you, if you are a strong economy, and I've said this, and I said this at the University of Mpumalanga only 2 weeks ago, as long as you are an economic giant, you must expect that people will come to you. It is the strong that people seek solace. So South Africa, as long as her economy is a strong economy, it is going to be important that they appreciate that people will look for those opportunities. And they too must remember that South African goods and services will only be valuable if they have a wider market. They have their banks in West Africa, they have their banks in East Africa, they have their banks in SADC, they have their own supermarkets, ShopRite, throughout the continent. And they must know that there is an umbilical cord between the country and other African countries, because if they are isolated in the manner in which the apartheid regime was isolated, it will not be in their best interest. And they must know that that is not what we can do, particularly when we talk about African unity, when we talk about SADC, when we talk about free movement of goods and services. They must know that Africa can only unite if there is free movement of goods and free movement of labor. That is the way that Africa is going to survive.
We'll finish on that note tonight, Professor Lumumba. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, on that note,
let us begin from the premise that the international community has acknowledged that corruption is a problem of a universal nature. That is why we have the United Nations against corruption. Africa has admitted that it is a continental problem. That is why we have the African Convention for Preventing and Combating Corruption. Many African countries have now created specialized bodies to spearhead the fight against corruption. And I'm using the word spearhead deliberately, because there is this misguided assumption that bodies such as those will eliminate corruption. All of us must be involved in the fight against corruption. And that is why it is acknowledged that there are 3 ways of dealing with the scourge of corruption. Education, so that the people are sensitized about the ills of corruption, so that people don't believe that corruption is a victimless crime, so that people are able to appreciate that when they have bad roads, when they have bad schools, when they don't have medicine in the hospitals, when they don't have things that ought to improve the quality of their lives, it's because money has been spent in the manner that it ought not to be to have been spent. And that further, that we prevent corruption, and when people participate in corruption, if they are found guilty in accordance with the law, then they are punished in a manner that is in conformity with the law. The problem that we have in many African countries, and that we have had in many African countries, is that corruption became a way of life. In different parts of the world, there is corruption, but it is the exception other than the rule. The beauty in many countries now is that the population is beginning to realize that corruption must be fought and that their lives are affected by corruption. Why do I say so? If you look at the revolutions that are taking place, or the changes that are taking place in many African countries now, look at what happened in Algeria, the removal of President Bouteflika. The people said, you preside over a corrupt regime, we are removing you, and they removed him. If you look at what is sometimes described as the Arab Spring in Tunisia, and even the election that was held a few weeks ago, it is held on the basis following a death, but the people are saying we want corruption eliminated. When President Mubarak was removed in Egypt, the people are saying it is because of corruption. When Bashir was removed in Sudan, people are saying it is because of corruption. Here in your own country, there was a time when we had a cash gate, and the people were annoyed about it, and they were saying we must fight against it. And I think that that is a good thing. The realization that you as a people are sick and that you need medicine, that is the beginning of resolving the problem. But as I said a little earlier, in the fight against social ills, the people must remain eternally vigilant. It's eternal vigilance that ensures that people are asked and questioned about their wealth. It is incomprehensible and unacceptable that somebody whom we know has a salary of 1 million kwacha is involved in projects that involve billions of kwacha, and yet we celebrate them. We must ensure that people live within their means. And there are African leaders who have lived within their means, and we remember them fondly.
Now, in that regard, what can people do? Because I don't know what happens in government or in politics. Someone is earning 100,000 kwacha. Now, he goes into government. He's an overnight millionaire or billionaire. Then what can people do in that regard?
But people have been doing things in Africa. I was making an argument that there are African leaders who have actually demonstrated that you can live within your means. Kenneth David Kaunda of Zambia, when he left office, it is on record that he had no more than the equivalent of $8,000 in his account. Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. In other words, you can serve a people, you can hold a public office and live within your means, and you will be celebrated. But what must be done, and this is what must be done consistently by Africans, is that when people misbehave, then they must be punished. Have we seen such punishment? Yes. There are people who are being taken to court. There are people whose properties are being seized. And once that is happening, and once people know that when you acquire property in an improper manner, that property will be seized and be taken away from you, then they'll know that you cannot continue to eat the fruits of a poison tree. And that if you do so,
the fruits of a poison tree,
you will die.
The fruits of a poison tree.
Yes.
What about if you had a chance to design the best anti-corruption body? How would you design it?
I would not go that route. This assumption that corruption is a Goliath and that you need a God-inspired David with a sling and a stone to fell Goliath is misguided. All of us have a duty to fight corruption. Wherever you are, if you are a Malawi and you are in Lilongwe and you are a school teacher, don't take a pen which does not belong to you and take it to your child at home. If you are a farmer who is invested with assets of your cooperative society, Make sure that you are a good protector of those things. All of us have a duty to participate in the fight against corruption, and all of us have a duty to ensure that we create an environment which is hostile for the survival of those who participate in corruption. And when we are called upon to vote, don't ask those who are seeking votes for money, because when you are bribed as a voter, you cannot begin to question corruption, because these fellows who you ask to bribe you when you are voting, where do they get the money from? We cannot condemn corruption if we ourselves have partaken of the corrupt proceeds. All of us have a duty. But to the extent that we know that corruption will subsist, it is important, in my view, to create an anti-corruption body which has the power to prosecute, which is well-resourced, so that it is capable of discharging its mandate of educating the people. It is capable of discharging its mandate of working with governmental bodies and private bodies to ensure that you create an environment that reduces incidents of corruption, and it is also capable of prosecuting the cases that it has investigated.
You have been the chief of anti-corruption board in Kenya.
Correct.
How did you do it?
First of all, it is important to note that I served for only 1 year, and at the time that we were serving, we were a staff of only 145. You cannot expect 145 people to deal with multiple government organizations. But what we did, and what continues to be done by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, is that they educate the people, that they work with institutions for purposes of ensuring that incidents of corruption are dealt with. They don't have the power to prosecute, but they work with the Director of Public Prosecution, and when there is credible evidence, men and women are brought before courts of law, and the judiciary tries them, and if there is evidence, then they are convicted. But as I said, each country must address its own circumstances in a unique way. Here you have your Anti-Corruption Bureau. In Tanzania, they have their own. In South Africa, they have had their own hawks. In Zimbabwe, they have their own. The critical thing is that each country must address the circumstances of corruption in a manner that is informed by those unique circumstances, with a view to achieving a society where corruption is the exception other than the rule.
Do you think, in your opinion, it is proper and right for presidents to hire and fire chiefs of the anti-corruption bodies?
You know, these are questions. Somebody must be hired by somebody. You can't hire yourself. So there is a process of hiring people. And once you are hired, and in Kenya, for example, when you are occupying such a position, you would invariably apply to a body, and once you have applied, you'll be subjected to an interview process, and once you've been subjected to an interview process, you'll then be subjected to parliamentary scrutiny, and once you've been subjected to parliamentary scrutiny, then the president will formally appoint you. The mere fact that a person has been appointed by a person or a body does not mean they cannot be functionally independent. As long as the law is clear about functional independence, then a person can be independent. Because in any event, even an anti-corruption body is a part of a governmental system. It cannot work outside of it. It is operating on the basis of funds that are voted by Parliament. It must be answerable, at least at the policy level, to a particular body. So let us not obsess ourselves as if we can have God appointing people and imposing them on others. They'll be appointed by human beings, but they have a duty to exercise their functions without fear or favor.
But the challenge is that you cannot you cannot do anything to the hand that has appointed.
That is not true. In South Africa, Thuli Madonsela, who was recommending the prosecution of President Zuma, was appointed by a body which had Zuma participating in the process. We have seen Nuhu Ribadu in Nigeria was appointed by the president. That is not true. The problem that we also have in Africa is that we are quick to use negative examples, and we forget to cite certain things that have worked. There are many places in Africa where people have been prosecuted, and people have recommended prosecution even of presidents.
Yeah, because here, the assertion has been that it is difficult to, to investigate those that are in power. because the chief, the anti-corruption bureau chief, is appointed by the president.
Then that individual who is afraid to investigate the president and others is just a coward. And then there is no cure for cowardice. If a person has been appointed and he has powers that are vested in him by law, then as long as you operate within the law, then you are doing the right thing. So let us not blame the law for the weakness of individuals who are cowards. And let us not assume that simply because a particular individual is incapable of discharging their mandate, then the system is wrong. Otherwise, we'll be amending the law every other time. We'll be amending the law every other time. But it must be remembered that the fight against corruption is a very lonely fight. Even those who shout at the top of their voice that we want the fight against corruption to be enhanced, if you begin to touch them, they begin to behave differently. And it is a very dangerous place to be in. It is a very dangerous place to be in.
You have been there, so you know what you're talking about.
So people should not just say, as they say in the safety of their homes, it is an easy thing. It is dangerous. Your lives are threatened. Your family may be threatened. So it is very easy to sit in the comfort of your home and say, oh, let's fight, let us do this, we want blood. And you also want, people cannot just be arrested. There must be evidence according to law. And it must be remembered that justice according to law and truth are two separate things sometimes. You cannot just take people to court because it is something that is popular. There must be evidence. It could very well be true that somebody has stolen, but there must be credible evidence which will move a court of law. And it's only then that you recommend people to be prosecuted. But I hear many people want this, what I call populist demand for blood, like they demanded the blood of Jesus, crucify him, crucify. I don't believe that.
So we cannot fight corruption in that sense?
No, if you do that, it is only good if another person is being crucified. But I ask people to ask yourself, what about if you yourself are falsely accused? And I know many people who have been falsely accused and are innocent. We must give them the opportunity to demonstrate that they are not guilty.
Professor Lumumba, you are well known for preaching good political governance, transparency and accountability. People might be asking, why have you failed to sell yourself to the electorate?
Two things. First of all, it's not true. In the year 2007, I participated in the electoral process as a candidate. So
parliamentary?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, but I'm talking on a higher level.
No, but
you're probably capable of being a president. You advise presidents and governments.
I mean, while that is possible, who knows? In future, one day, I may want to say that.
Are you contemplating?
Not for the moment. But I'm saying that this obsession, there is also a problem in Africa. The problem that everybody must want to be a president, everybody must want to be a minister, everybody must want to be in government. You can serve your country in different capacities. If you are an accountant, you can serve your country in that capacity. If you are a lawyer, you can serve your country in that capacity. If you are a doctor, you can serve your country in that capacity. Some of the greatest men on earth have never held any public office. Which public office did Martin Luther King Jr. hold? Which public office did Malcolm X hold? Which public office did Mahatma Gandhi hold? Which public office before he died did Steve Biko hold? Which public office did Desmond Mpilo Tutu hold? So this idea that all of us must be in government is misguided. I believe that if one chooses an area in which they serve, then that is their contribution. Right now, by grace of God and by courtesy of my fellow Africans, I travel across many African countries. And I want to believe that by merely standing, if you may, like John the Baptist in the wilderness and making certain pronouncement, I'm out of 10 hearts, I'm possibly touching one. And that is my current contribution. As to what I will contribute in future, not even the devil knows.
Because others might say you are a good orator,
yes,
but you haven't been in power. So being outside can mean something else.
And they're entitled to say that. They're entitled to say that, and I won't argue with them, but they would be wrong. I've been in government position. I was the secretary of the Kenya Review Commission, Constitution Review Commission for 5 years. I was the head of anti-corruption. I've held many positions, and I continue to make a contribution. But there is no shortage of professional fault finders. Okay. Those ones I don't worry about. Okay. Winston Churchill, who was a racist and I don't like very much, used to say that if you want to look at every person who throws a stone at you, you will never make any progress. You must do what you are doing and allow the critics. Critics are people who make a contribution, but they do not know the pain of suffering. So some of us who actually have the courage to say what we are saying, we are making a contribution. So you are hiding in your bedroom and hiding under the pillow and hiding under the anonymity of Twitter and WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram without making your positions known is sometimes not very useful.
They're quite a lot.
Oh, there are legions of who hide behind the anonymity of WhatsApp. But at least some of us, by God's grace, are raising our voices.
So you are speaking the right stuff.
Yes.
You're giving the right advice.
Yes.
Are the African leaders listening? And if they're listening, are they doing the right thing?
You know, that is a question that is too broad to be answered in the manner that you possibly expect. When I am invited to speak at an audience, as I have been invited here to speak to accountants, I'm speaking to accountants. And my hope is that the 2,500 accountants that I'll be speaking to here in Malawi are men and women in positions of leadership. If I say something that is worthwhile, they'll separate the wheat from the chaff. And if they accept that there is certain wheat, they'll go and propagate it. If somebody else in position of leadership thinks that I've said something that is worthy, then they will use their position to make it worthwhile. And I believe that it is our duty, not my duty as an individual, it is our duty collectively as Africans, as Malawians, as Namibians, to ensure that what I am doing and what we are doing collectively informs the national agenda in a manner that brings changes. And I want to say this. Sometimes we Africans are very negative and hard on ourselves. Why? When you listen to African commentators, particularly people in the media such as yourself, you want to speak, not you of course, but others, want to speak as if nothing is happening in Africa. Nothing good is happening in Africa. But there are good things. Well, the only thing that we are saying is that things could happen a lot better. So let us identify the positive things that are happening and also give them the oxygen of publicity. Let us also give them the opportunity to thrive so that people can know that Africa can work. Take, for example, good things that are happening in Africa. In Morocco, they are dealing with solar. One of the biggest solar farms is going to be in Morocco. In Kenya, we have one of the biggest wind farms in the world. Those are good things. In Rwanda, beautiful things are happening. In Namibia, beautiful things are happening. Let us talk about that. But we should not stop condemning the ill that are taking place. In other words, let us give a balanced view. We must tell our story in all its permutations.